Hi, my name is Corrie and I'm reading to you from Corrie ten Boom's book, The Hiding Place. We are in chapter 11, The Lieutenant. I was walking with a guard behind and a little to the right of her, so my feet would not touch the sacrosanct mat, down a corridor I had not seen before. A turn to the right, a few steps down, right again. What an endless labyrinth this prison was. At last we stepped out into a small interior courtyard. A drizzle of rain was falling. It was a chill, raw morning in late May. After 3 months in prison, I had been called for my first hearing. Barred windows stared from tall buildings on 3 sides of the courtyard. Along the fourth was a high wall, and against this stood a row of small huts. So these were the infamous interrogations where they took place. My breath became short and hard as I thought back to the reports I had passed on the night of Hitler's birthday. Lord Jesus, you were called to a hearing too. Show me what to do. And then I saw something. Whoever used the fourth of the huts had planted a row of tulips along the side. They were wilted now, only tall stems and yellowing leaves. But, dear Lord, let me go to hut number 4. The guard had paused to unstrap a long military cape fastened to the shoulder of her uniform. Protected from the rain, she crunched up the gravel path. Past the first hut, the second, the third, she halted in front of the hut with a flower bed and rapped on the door. Ja, Herren, called a man's voice. The guard pushed open the door, gave a straight-armed salute, and marched smartly off. The man wore a gun in a leather holster and a bee-ribboned uniform. He removed his hat, and I was staring into the face of the gentle-mannered man who had visited me in my cell. I am Lieutenant Rams, he said, stepping to the door to close it behind me. You are shivering. Here, let me get the fire going. He filled a pot-bellied stove from a small coal scuttle, for all the world a kindly German householder entertaining a guest. What if this were all a subtle trap? This kind human manner, perhaps he had simply found it more effective than brutality in tricking the truth from affection-starved people. O Lord, let no weak gullibility on my part endanger another's life. I hope, the officer was saying, we won't have many more days this spring as cold as this one. He drew out a chair for me to sit on. Wearily I accepted it. How strange, after 3 months, to feel a chair back behind me. Chair arms for my hands. The heat from the stove was quickly warming the little room. In spite of myself, I began to relax. I ventured a timid comment about the tulips. So tall, they must have been beautiful. Oh, they were, he seemed ridiculously pleased. The best I've ever grown. At home, we always have Dutch bulbs. We talked about flowers for a while, and then he said, I would like to help you, Miss ten Boom, but you must tell me everything. I may be able to do something, but only if you do not hide anything from me. So there it was already. All the friendliness, the kindly concern that I have half believed in. all a device to elicit information. Well, why not? This man was a professional with a job to do. But I too, in a small way, was a professional. For an hour he questioned me, using every psychological trick that the young men of our group had drilled me in. In fact, I felt like a student who was crammed for a difficult exam, and then is tested on only the most elementary material. It soon became clear that they believed the BG had been a headquarters for raids on food ration offices around the country. Of all the illegal activities I had on my conscience, this was probably the one I knew least about. Other than receiving the stolen cards each month and passing them on, I knew no details of the operation. Apparently, my real ignorance began to show. After a while, Lieutenant Rams stopped making notes of my hopelessly stupid answers. Your other activities, Miss Ten Boom, what would you like to tell me about them? Other activities? Oh, you mean you want to know about my church for mentally retarded people? And I plunged into an eager account of my efforts at preaching to the feeble-minded. The lieutenant's eyebrows rose higher and higher. What a waste of time and energy, he exploded at last. If you want converts, surely one normal person is worth all the half-wits in the world. I stared into the man's intelligent blue-grey eyes. True National Socialist philosophy, I thought. Tulip or no. And then, to my astonishment, I heard my own voice saying boldly, May I tell you the truth, Lieutenant Rams? This hearing, Miss Ten Boom, is predicated on the assumption that you will do me that honor. The truth, sir, I said, swallowing, is that God's viewpoint is sometimes different from ours. So different that we could not even guess at it unless he had given us a book which tells us such things. I knew it was madness to talk this way to a Nazi officer, but he said nothing, so I plunged ahead. In the Bible, I learned that God values us not for our own strength or our brains, but simply because he made us. Who knows? In his eyes, a half-wit may be worth more than a watchmaker or a lieutenant. Lieutenant Rams stood up abruptly. That will be all for today. He walked swiftly to the door. Guard! I heard footsteps on the gravel path. The prisoner will return to his cell. Following the guard through the long, cold corridors, I knew I had made a mistake. I had said too much. I had ruined whatever chance I had with this man, that this man might take an interest in my case. And yet, the following morning, it was Lieutenant Rams himself who unlocked my cell door and escorted me to the hearing. Apparently, he did not know of the regulation that forbade prisoners to step on the mat, for he indicated that I was to walk ahead of him down the center of the hall. I avoided the eyes of the guards along the route, guilty as a well-trained dog discovered on the living room sofa. In the courtyard this time, a bright sun was shining. Today, he said, we will stay outside. You are pale. You are not getting enough sun. Gratefully, I followed him to the farthest corner of the little yard, where the air was still warm. We settled our backs against the wall. I could not sleep last night, the lieutenant said, thinking about that book where you have read such different ideas. What else does it say in there? On my closed eyelids, the sun glimmered and blazed. It says, I began slowly, that a light has come into this world so that we need no longer walk in the dark. Is there darkness in your life, Lieutenant? There was a long silence. There is great darkness, he said at last. I cannot bear the work I do here. Then, all at once, he was telling me about his wife and children in Bremen, about their garden, their dogs, their summer hiking vacations. Bremen was bombed again last week. Each morning I ask myself, are they still alive? There is one who has them always in his sight, Lieutenant Rams. Jesus is the light the Bible shows to me, the light that can shine even in such darkness as yours. The man pulled the visor off his hat lower over his eyes. The skull and crossbones glinted in the sun. When he spoke, it was so low, I could hardly hear. What can you know of darkness like mine? 2 more mornings the hearings continued. He had dropped all pretense of questioning me on underground activities and seemed especially to enjoy hearing about my childhood. Mama, father, the aunts, he wanted to hear stories about them again and again. He was incensed to learn that father had died right here in Scheveningen. The documents on my case made no mention of it. These documents did answer one question, the reason for solitary confinement. Prisoners' condition contagious to others in cell. I stared at the brief typed words where Lieutenant Ram's fingers rested. I thought of the long wind-haunted nights, the scowling guards, the rule of silence. But if it wasn't punishment, why were they so angry at me? Why couldn't I talk? The lieutenant squared the edges of the papers in front of him. A prison is like any institution, Miss ten Boom. Certain rules, certain ways of doing things. But I'm not contagious now. I've been better for weeks and weeks, and my sister is so close. Lieutenant Rams, if I could only see Betsy, if I could just talk with her a few minutes. He lifted his eyes from the desk, and I saw anguish in them. Miss ten Boom, is it possible that I appear to you as a powerful person? I wear a uniform. I have a certain authority over those under me. But I am in prison, dear lady from Haarlem, a prison stronger than this one. It was the 4th and final hearing, and we had come back into the small hut for the singing of the procès verbal. He gathered up the completed transcript and went out with it, leaving me alone. I was sorry to say goodbye to this man who was struggling so earnestly for truth. The hardest thing for him seemed to be that Christians should suffer. How can you believe in God now? He asked. What kind of a God would have let that old man die here in Scheveningen? I got up from the chair and held my hands out to the squat little stove. I did not understand either why father had died in such a place. I did not understand a great deal. And suddenly, I was thinking of father's own answer to hard questions. Some knowledge is too heavy. You cannot bear it. Your father will carry it until you are able. Yes, I would tell Lieutenant Rams about the train case. He always liked stories about father. But when the lieutenant returned to the room, a guard from the women's wing was with him. Prisoner Ten Boom has completed her hearings, he said, and will return to her cell. The young woman snapped to attention. As I stepped through the door, Lieutenant Rams leaned forward. Walk slowly, he said, in corridor F. Walk slowly? What did he mean? The guard strode down the long door-lined hall so swiftly I had to trot to keep up with her. Ahead of us, a prison trustee was unlocking the door to a cell. I trailed behind the guard as much as I dared, my heart thumping wildly. It would be Betsy's cell. I knew it. Then I was abreast of the door. Betsy's back was to the corridor. I could see only the graceful, unswept bun of her chestnut hair. The other women in the cell stared curiously into the corridor. Her head remained bent over something in her lap. But I had seen the home Betsy had made in Scheveningen. For unbelievably, against all logic, the cell was charming. My eyes seized only a few details as I inched reluctantly past. The straw pallets were rolled instead of piled in a heap, standing like little pillars along the walls, each with a lady's hat on top of it. A headscarf had somehow been hung along the wall. The contents of several food packages were arranged on a small shelf. I could just hear Betsy saying, "The red biscuit tin here in the center." Even the coats hanging on their hooks were part of the welcome of that room, each sleeve draped over the shoulder of the coat next to it, like a row of dancing children. "Schneller! Aber schneller!" I jumped and hurried after my escort. It had been a glimpse only, 2 seconds at the most, but I walked through the corridors of Scheveningen with Betsy's singing spirit at my side. All morning I heard doors opening and closing. Now keys rattled outside my own. A very young guard in a very new uniform, bounded in. "Prisoners, stand at attention," she squeaked. I stared at her wide, blinking eyes. The girl was in mortal fear of something or someone. Then a shadow filled the doorway, and the tallest woman I had ever seen stepped into the cell. Her features were classically handsome, the face and height of a goddess, but one carved in marble. Not a flicker of feeling registered in her eyes. "No sheets here either," she said in German to the guard. "See that she has 2 by Friday. 1 to be changed every 2 weeks. The ice-cold eyes appraised me exactly as they had the bed. "How many showers does this prisoner get?" The guard wet her lips. "About 1 a week, Watchmeisterin." 1 a week? 1 shower a month was closer. She will get 2 a week. "Sheets? Regular showers? Were conditions going to be better? The new head matron took 2 strides into the cell. She did not need the cot to reach the overhead bulb. Rip! Off came my red cellophane lampshade. She pointed to a box of soda crackers that had come in a second package from Nolly. No boxes in the cells, cried the little oaf. No boxes in the cells, cried the little guard in Dutch, as indignantly as though this had been a long-standing rule. Not knowing what else to do, I dumped the crackers out onto the cot. At the matron's unspoken command, I emptied a bottle of vitamins and a sack of peppermint drops the same way. Unlike the former head matron who shrieked and scolded endlessly in a rusted hinge voice, this woman worked in a terrifying silence. With a gesture, she directed the guard to feel beneath the mattress. My heart wedged in my throat. My precious remaining gospel was hidden under there. The guard knelt and ran her hands the length of the cot. But whether she was too nervous to do a thorough job, or whether there was a more mysterious explanation, she straightened up empty-handed. And then they were gone. I stood gazing numbly at the jumble of food on my cot. I thought of this woman reaching Betsy's cell, reducing it again to 4 walls and a prison cot. A chill wind was blowing through Shevkin, cleaning, ordering, killing. It was this tall, ramrod straight woman who unlocked the door to my cell one afternoon in the second half of June and admitted Lieutenant Rams. At the severity in his face, I swallowed the greeting that almost burst from me. "You will come to my office," he said briefly. "The notary has come." We might as well have been total strangers. Notary? I said stupidly. "For the reading of your father's will." He made an impatient gesture. Obviously, this minor matter had interrupted a busy day. "It's the law. Family present when a will is opened." Already he was heading from the cell and down the corridor. I broke into a clumsy run to keep up with the strides of the silent woman beside me. The law? What law? And since when had the German occupation government concerned itself with Dutch legal procedures? Family present. No, don't let yourself think of it. At the door to the courtyard, the matron turned, erect and impassive, back along the corridor. I followed Lieutenant Rams into the dazzling early summer afternoon. He opened the door for me into the 4th hut. Before my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I was drowning in Willem's embrace. Corrie, baby sister. It was 50 years since he called me that. Now Nolly's arm was around me too, the other one still clinging to Betsy as though by the strength of her grip she would hold us together forever. Betsy, Nolly, Willem. I did not know which name to cry first. Tinny was in that little room too, and Flip, and another man. When I had time to look, I recognized the Haarlem notary who had been called in on the watch shop's few legal consultations. We held each other at arm's length to look. We babbled questions all at once. Betsy was thin and prison pale, but it was Willem who shocked me. His face was gaunt, yellow, and pain-haunted. He had come home this way from Scheveningen, Tinny told me. 2 of the 8 men crowded into his tiny cell had died of jaundice while he was there. Willem, I could not bear to see him this way. I crooked my arm through his, standing close so that I did not have to look at him, loving the sound of his deep rolling voice. Willem did not seem aware of his own illness. His concern was all for Kik. This handsome blonde son had been seized a month before while helping an American parachutist reach the North Sea. They believed he had been on one of the recent prison trains into Germany. As for father, they had learned a few more facts about his last days. He had apparently become ill in his cell and been taken by car to the municipal hospital in The Hague. There, no bed had been available. Father had died in a corridor, separated somehow from his records or any clue as to his identity. Hospital authorities had buried the unknown old man in the pauper cemetery. The family believed they had located the particular grave. I glanced over at Lieutenant Rams. He was standing with his back to us as we talked, staring down at the cold, unlit stove. Swiftly, I opened the package that Nolly had pressed into my hand with the first embrace. It was what my leaping heart had told me, a Bible, the entire book in a compact volume, tucked inside a small pouch with a string for wearing around the neck as we had once carried our identity cards. I dropped it quickly over my head and down my back beneath my blouse. I couldn't even find words with which to thank her. The day before, in the shower line, I had given away my last remaining gospel. We don't know all the details, Willem was saying in a low voice to Betsy. Just that after a few days, the soldiers were taken off guard duty at the Beji. Just after a few days, the soldiers were taking off-guard duty at the Beji and a police station there instead. The fourth night, he believed, the chief had succeeded in assigning Ruth and another of our group to the same shift. They had found all the Jews well, though cramped and hungry, and seen them to new hiding places. And now, I whispered back, are they all right now? Willem lowered his deep-sunk eyes into mine. He had never been good at concealing difficult truths. They are all right, Corrie. All except Mary. Old Mary Italy, he said, had been arrested one day walking down a city street. Where she had been going and why she had exposed herself this way in broad daylight, nobody knew. The time is up. Lieutenant Rams left his perusal of the stove and nodded to the notary. Proceed with the reading of the will. It was a brief, informal document. The Beji was to be home for Betsy and me as long as we wanted it. Should there ever be any money released from the sale of house or watch shop, he knew we would recall his equal love for us all. He committed us with joy to the constant care of God. In the silence that followed, we all suddenly bowed our heads. Lord Jesus, Willem said, we praise you for these moments together under the protection of this good man. How can we thank him? We have no power to do him any service. Lord, allow us to share this inheritance from our Father with him as well. Take him too and his family into your constant care. Outside, a guard's footsteps sounded on the crunchy gravel walk. And that's all for today. Next time, chapter 12. Bye.